it's a lot of the intangibles in life that have the biggest effect sometimes.
Agreed.
And that's the thing about starting a routine and all that. There's so many intangible aspects that cannot be explained by it. But yeah, I was a 2-5 player until I got your material, the Pio Unlocked. But that came... I wouldn't have done anything with it if it didn't come at the exact moment of my life when I got it.
Thank you.
You know, I had been thoroughly owned by some guys online who were doing the 1/3 style. I went from 2-5 live to playing online. I had no idea how to react. I knew I was getting just decimated by these guys, but I had no idea how to counter it. So it was a bunch of factors that I got your material. I started, I had a new roommate at the time too, he's super into fitness and health and mindset and all that. So he was a very big factor, a very big influence. And that's when I started doing my morning routine. It was a whole bunch of different factors all at once. I remember I put in 12 hours a day for like 3 months. And
I think it just starts to amplify your energy on all fronts.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I want you to walk me through your current approach to getting better and also competing. And then I want you to dig deep for the thing that you are currently working on that feels like if you had more perspective around it, it could open up the next dimension for you.
Okay.
So I want to feel into, because I know you already like have your shit together, it seems pretty completely in terms of being at Nosebleeds pretty much. And
yeah, I suck.
Yeah, thank you for actually leading with that.
Yeah, that's been the biggest mindset shift for me.
And this is the thing I said the other day on tape too, like, I know I suck at tournaments, and there's this weird thing where when I say that, people think that's Nick's fake humble way of, but here's the thing, I think most of you suck more.
Yes.
Like,
thank you.
It's like, I don't need to, and I hope that's understood properly, because if you actually see that perspective, that's where you should be operating from, because that's the moment where you only begin competing with yourself, which is how it always should be.
Yep.
So talk to me about your current day-to-day schedule and specifically what you're doing to improve, and specifically what it feels like in the moments where you feel like you're not accelerating as fast as you could. Like, there's moments in every player's day where he's like, how could I replace this process with one that's more efficient? Where is that for you? And don't leave out the performance-based part at the table. That's a part of this.
Oh, it's a huge part. Yeah, flow state and all that. It's a huge part. Okay, so let's start with the day-to-day schedule, I guess. So I am a big habit of routine. When I'm in my daily routine, I function very well, and I'm able to get in the flow and all that because I've built things into that. I've been here now for a month. God, it's been rough. Just living... I mean, live poker is tough to maintain a schedule, first off, because you go play for 10 hours, you can't go home and go right to sleep. You can't do that. You need, like, your brain needs to defragment what you just, all the experiences you've just processed.
What's your approach to that?
Out here, smoke weed.
Nice. You're in the right place.
Yeah, I had quit buying for a few months now, so a little upset that I had to revert, but sometimes you have to take a step back to take a leap forward, you know. Still trying to find a place for that in my life.
Hard thing to balance.
It's a very hard thing to balance, yeah. But yeah, that aside though. So, for me, building a routine was the main thing. I've learned that I, for a long time, was going to the gym right away, because that's the only way that I could go to the gym.
Right after the session?
Right away to start the day.
Okay.
You know, wake up. And also, I learned that waking up early is the greatest life hack ever, biggest improvement to my life.
Top reason why?
Quality of life improves, you're happier. You're just naturally happier seeing sunlight. There's like, what is it, blue rays, I think, or no? There's some kind of rays in the morning that help regulate sleep schedule. And I've always said I'm not not a morning person. That's wrong. I didn't have the context of knowing what it's like to actually.
In fact, I would probably say that people that say they're not morning people are the ones that need the morning the most.
Yeah. I've been a notorious. I've gotten the worst sleep always. Like, I would go to sleep at 6 a.m. and your body's not. It's not natural for us. Yeah. It's just a very unnatural thing. You don't sleep as well. You fluctuate more in your sleep times, which is also very bad. You should actually be pretty rigid in what time you go to sleep. Now, you're allowed to make deviations from that, but overall, you should be going to sleep roughly the same time. You know, being on some sort of schedule is a good thing. It sounds like it hinders freedom, but it actually gives more freedom in a weird
There it
way.
is again.
Yeah, it's a strange paradox. But okay, so let's start with what was the first question exactly that you had? You said you wanted me to talk about 3 things.
Specifically what you're doing to grow in terms of your career, getting better, and then link that into how it becomes more apparent to you that you're potentially roadblocked or paradoxed when you go to sit down and play.
Okay, so how do I approach growing and getting better? Understanding that it's not a destination, it's a journey. That would be probably the most important part. There's no end to it. It's everything I do in every part of my day is growth oriented for the most part. Even the relaxation part, which is extremely important. I'm big about like rising tide. Rising tide raises all ships. So out here, I'm trying to make as many friends as possible, but not just, naturally I try to make friends, but trying to gauge where people are at, how I can help them improve whatever they need to improve upon, and how they can also improve whatever I need to improve upon. You know, like, there's a big difference between learning how to use Pio compared to Munker. You know, if somebody knows how to use Munker and they don't know how to use Pio, we'd be a great fit.
Nice.
You know, like, it's mutually beneficial. There's this, for whatever reason, people believe that you shouldn't give away your secrets. You know, like, oh, if I tell you how to do this, you're going to get better. I spent 1,000 hours studying last year. I can tell people, basically, I can give out the majority of my game plan to people, and they're still not going to know how to fucking counter it, because they will not know how to counter it until you put in those hours. And even the wasted hours of putting in things, where, like, I had build trees where I didn't have check raise options. And I was, like, wasted 30 hours in Pio, but not really, because now I know how Solver thinks.
Nice.
You know, I know because of that series of mistakes, I'm now that much better. Which at the time, I was like, oh shit, I can't believe I just wasted 30 hours on this. This sucks. No, it's actually, big picture, a great use of time.
Nice, man. Nice.
And that's the main thing I would say when it comes to studying, is understanding that you might not understand what you learned at the moment or the value of it, but later on, your context is going to change, and it's going to require that information that you couldn't quite grasp.
Even if it's only being able to, like, and this has happened a lot, the beauty of fucking up a lot with solver work along the way is that it gives you a very keen radar for being able to have someone put a bullshit sim in front of you and be like, no, that's either solved incorrectly or it's not worth what you think it's worth because you forgot to do this or you didn't account for this. Yep. I can't tell you how many times, like, okay, I never said anything about this, but there is a lot of value in being able to assess a model or sim that's introduced to you by a player or a student. This is what happens a ton in poker. Somebody brings something and puts it in front of you and they're like freaking out about this thing that they found. And they're like, this changes everything. I don't know what the hell, how to interpret this or anything. And you're just like, no, you forgot to node lock that, bro. Go run and do it again. Like, there's stuff like that happens all the time where if we weren't savvy from making past mistakes constantly, we wouldn't be able to look at something and be like, this is off. Like, a lot of times you see something that's so outside of the bounds that you don't even bother to invest any emotion into the analysis of it before you tell someone, I think you should go rerun that again, or have 2 of your friends do it and be like, before I even look at this, I need to see that somebody else gets the same outputs as you just got, because this just looks too bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Being a coach or having a wide network is a cool place to be able to delegate stuff like that, because if you're offering enough value to people to begin with, it's not your job to go rerun the sim of somebody who's asking you a question. I know this is a micro point, but like, this is a big time saver.
Huge point.
Huge time saver.
It drives me insane when it's like, I'm known as very arrogant and cocky because I say things like this. I know where I'm at in life. I know where other people are. I've spent enough time to get to where I'm at. When somebody comes to me asking for help and I say, all right, go spend 50 hours using Pio and then we'll talk, they take offense to that. But that's exactly why. you need to really mess around with stuff, and then you can utilize the knowledge. Like, this is probably going to come across poorly, but like if you were to go to a chess grandmaster, I don't know chess very well at all, but if I went to a chess grandmaster, I wouldn't go to him for teaching. He would tell me, all right, read this book, this book, this book, this book, this book, and then in 10 years we'll talk.
It's far and away, when I speak to other coaches in the industry, the biggest thing we connect on is that the problem with students in general is the degree of entitlement that they approach coaches with.
Yes.
They either are coming from an inclination that it needs to look like they think it needs to look, or they demand more attention for work that's done poorly, asking you to correct it for them without realizing how much of an energy drain that is on the coach and how little benefit that is of the student.
Yeah.
Basically asking for handouts. Okay, so getting back on track, assuming that you're building out a network where there's reciprocal mutual benefit being relayed back and forth, which is a skill in itself, that you're identifying these people who you can basically trade value with.
Yeah.
Assuming that's going well and the tide is rising, where is the point in your day, or, and this doesn't have to be just in study, this could be when you go sit down and play, where is that point where you notice you could potentially upgrade something if you just had, and I don't know what this is for you, but what is your fear, or what do you feel like you're potentially lacking to get to the next level? When you feel confusion arise in a hand, or when you hit a wall with a sim and you're wondering, like, is this thing actually offering me a win rate, or if I could only figure this out, what is that for you right now? And if you don't have it, make something up.
All right, yeah. I mean...
Or figure it out now.
I got a bunch of fears. I, for the last few months, have been stuck in GTO hell, I'd say, for the first half of this year. Really trying to implement the correct 3-better fold ranges and all that. And there's such a huge difference between 100 and 200 big blinds. I finally, in the last month and a half, have just gotten rid of that weight. And now I'm just embracing... I've become more empathetic in the past few months again, which is, I'm naturally empathetic, but during GTO hell, I was very rigid in my thought. You have to do this with this, you have to do that with this, and I wasn't being empathetic to where other people are at. If somebody's only 4-betting you with aces, you should probably 3-bet with any 2 cards, right?
So do you mean empathetic in terms of trying to relate to people who are also trying to learn those ranges, or empathetic like realizing that your opponents are operating so far from equilibrium that you shouldn't bother?
Where somebody's at on the journey. We're all on a journey, and it's very similar for everybody. So the further you get along your journey, the easier it is to identify where somebody else is on theirs.
Yep.
The student is unable to identify where the master's at, but the master can easily say where the student is at. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I mean. Everybody at the table, when I'm at a 9-handed table, there's 8 people who do at least one thing better than me. So it's identifying that thing.
Nice.
And I do at least one thing better than all of them. So it's identifying that as well. So it's trying to figure out what do they do well? How do I counter that? What do they do poorly? How do I exploit that? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's a skill that I'm trying to improve upon, because it's so easy to just get back. It's so easy to believe that you are the greatest player ever.
Yep.
You get on that upswing, and suddenly all the skills that you learned or relearned during the downswing, suddenly they go away, and then you go on a downswing again. So it's just maintaining that level of just, this is probably my biggest issue for me, is being Buddhist in my approach towards the game, of just not rising my emotion too much or lowering it too much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'm interested to hear what benefit you think that emotional equilibrium provides you. Top benefit.
I see that as being GTO. If you play GTO, that's like bounce. You're unexploitable. You're not going to maximize your earnings, but you're going to reduce all the downsides, and you're going to make money. I don't think that having a Buddhist approach is the correct or best approach, but it's what I need to work on before I can go back to exploitable. Does that make sense?
Because it's almost like a different dimension of optimal to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a friend explained it to me best once. I've got a history of like manic depression in my family and all that. So he said if you think of happiness on like a grade scale, you've got 0 as neutral, plus 10 as the happiest day of your life, negative 10 is the absolute worst day of your life, right? So you start off at like 0, maybe naturally you're at like 1 or something. But as you allow yourself to get happier, well, let's say you go up to like plus 5. Now let's say something bad happens and you're negative 3. Well, that's an 8-point swing on the scale. That's pretty massive. So where see like Buddhism is just trying to maintain between plus 1 or negative 1, just trying to really ideally be at 0 regardless. Whatever happens, happens. I don't think that's optimal for humans. I think we can do better than that. I think you can have maybe plus 1 as your optimal base level. And as things get better in your life, the downswings hurt less. The downsides hurt less. You start to see them as the positive that they are. You see, hey, I've got leaks I need to work on. Maybe it's your hubris. Maybe I need to be more grounded. Maybe it's you're too spewy in certain areas that are very selective and only come up every so often. But they just came up back in your downswing.
It's what it is, I think. And the funny, like, when I think about that model that you just organized, the gradient of happiness, what I think is potentially the really huge paradigm shift is when you start to see that there never was actually a spectrum of happiness for the one who releases preference altogether. So I truly believe there is a paradigm where upon massive diligent exploration of the negative 10 to positive 10 scale and going through repetitive cycles and experiencing pleasure, pain, and I think, and I have experienced at times, a paradigm that operates with almost the experiential grokking, like it's a different type of wisdom. It's like you literally start to understand that pleasure actually equals pain from this paradigm. Stimulus itself is the issue. And when I say the issue, I mean the stimulus and the variation of stimulus that you're going through is what's creating distortion. And it's the distortion that you're ultimately trying to mitigate. Because for the one who mitigates distortion, there is no more self-sabotage. I think that's the biggest thing. Like every mistake that you make in poker distills down to you undergoing some sort of distortion in the moment. Assuming you have the right technical framework.
Yeah.
If you're performing below your potential, it's because you were distorted in the moment. So emotional neutrality or just emotional stability is the entryway, it's the doorway to lesser distortion. Then you'll eventually reach a point where it's not even necessary to monitor your emotions because you're so free from relying on emotional stability that it almost feels like, and I can't say I'm stable in this place, but it almost feels like you are removed from experience altogether. And then it's just like, well, why would I ever do anything different than what I know is right? Because I've shifted my perspective to such a degree that I see no benefit in monitoring this experience as though it has any influence over me in the big picture. And this is what I'm trying to depart on the industry is the million hand perspective is the most powerful perspective, because if you truly grasp that you are completely safe and secure and that it's okay to relax if you were to just play a million hands in a row correctly, you would not ride the wave of hand by hand variance. But so many people are getting caught in the micro illusion, which leads to the emotional distortion and the disruptions and the waves of imbalances that I think we're enduring. So I try to think of practical, concrete ways to deliver this because it's an abstract thing or it's a paradoxical thing, and those are very hard things to grasp.
It's almost impossible for humans to think in the abstract, in the aggregate.
And I think, especially going back to what you said about the master can see where the student is at, the student can't see where the master is at. I have full empathy for the fact that it's very difficult for certain people at certain stages to think in paradox. But I do believe that is the highest level of approaching problems. And ultimately, I think paradoxes don't actually exist, they get transcended. And that's what I'm talking about here. The moment where you see there is no more need to try to create emotional stability. is the end of the paradigm, the Buddhist paradigm. Like maybe they would call that enlightenment, I guess.
Yeah, no, that actually makes a lot of sense.
So I love looking at shit in levels like this because, I mean, it's funny that we talk about this because I ask you, like, you know, what is the perspective that you feel like is getting stagnant in your reality? And like, you know, maybe this is one that would be cool to explore, is take the Buddhist approach as far as it goes for you and then start asking the question, what if I didn't even need to be, what if I was so detached and free from emotion that I didn't even need to control my state?
Yeah.
That's a really deep question.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying go off the rails and blow coke before your session, you know what I mean? But I'm saying, like, what if being triggered in a hand didn't even come close to affecting how you behave?
Yeah.
Like, what if there was a different dimension of you that opened up that almost observed the triggered version of you? And it was like, this is kind of fun. Nick's just like tilted in his hand, but you know, watch this. Nick's still making the correct decision that he would make were he not tilted.
Yeah.
That's, to me, the fun stuff, is observing myself on that level and being like, wow, there's observable growth here. Like in my mindset, like that I didn't have this capacity to observe myself like this previously. That's what I love.
Yeah.
And it's what I think is most valuable. And I think that the times where I'm learning the most currently is when I find myself unable to access that degree of balance, and then I really focus on that and I say, what is stopping me from going there? That's when I find important beliefs that I haven't fully excavated. Like, trying to think the last time I was tilted in the series.
Yeah, to be clear, I actually haven't. I think I tilted once. It's more away from the table where my mood gets affected.
Sure. I mainly mean...
With the more you study, the more discipline you get with everything, and the harder it is to deviate from what you know is correct.
And I think at a high level, you need to start separating technical tilt from emotional tilt.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the skill that a high performer has is he can be emotionally tilted and perform accurately.
Yeah.
But it also leads to that white knuckling approach that I talked about earlier, where like you would be better off getting to the root belief that's causing you to grip in the first place. And that's why I think these million hand perspectives and stuff like that is just super powerful, because if you truly actually integrate that, the charge of the hand in front of you completely diffuses.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing. Like, in my opinion, I wrote this down in my notepads. It's like one of the only notes I took at the table recently. It was like, the note is, I'll post it on Instagram at some point, freedom is greater than control. And I truly believe that's the paradigm shift that we're talking about. It's in its most distilled form. I'm no longer in a place where I'm giving as much value to controlling anything in my experience, including emotions. I'm trying to basically reach a level of freedom from needing all of that, where I unlock a completely different pocket of awareness, and I'm just kind of chilling back deep in the pocket. To me, the deepest level mindset work is how deep in the pocket are you sitting in any moment. That's how non-reactive you ultimately are.
Yeah, for me, I've been using the mantra a lot in the past few months of I want to influence my surroundings, I don't want to be influenced by my surroundings.
Nice.
You know, and just repeating that in times where I do get tilted. I'm like, how pathetic is it if you get tilted because somebody says something to you? You're literally out of control of yourself.
Yeah.
That's just sad.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of man that I want to be.
Nice.
But it is an element of who I am. So there's growth away from that, and that's why I have the mantra. I understand that this is what I need to use to get to who I want to be.
Nice. There's so much there, and the paradox that I think that illuminates very well is self-critical balance with self-acceptance.
Yeah.
Like the discernment to see that I have this tendency and to hold myself accountable there, but also the self-acceptance to put a practical solution or action plan in place to begin to deal with that. A lot of it just starting with accepting that it exists.
Yeah.
Like this might be one of the bigger things I could say to type A type high performers, which like I think we both can say we came from that overly self-critical inclination at definitely at certain stages.
Yeah.
The ability to start to balance the necessary self-acceptance to allow yourself to actually acknowledge that a problem exists. so much of my 20s was about averting the fact that I was dealing with emotions that I didn't want to face. And when I actually sat with it long enough, and it took burnout for me to actually face it, it took losing the ability to continue on the current path. Like, my fuel tank just died. And I sat there for a while and I said, okay, so clearly I can't continue this direction, but it was the first time where I actually acknowledged that there was a clear problem, and only in that acknowledgement was I able to start to dismantle what it was. And I started to say, well, I'm being hella insistent about the GTO path. It's not really offering me the practicality that I thought. It's certainly not practical, period. And it's not even going to perform as well as I thought in an imbalanced market. I didn't want to dovetail too far, but now I want to say this thing because I think a lot of people just don't see how this scales. If GTO were thoroughly incentivized, that would mean that to get to the top level, you would need to be playing perfectly GTO.
Yeah.
Let's just extrapolate, and that's generally what this leads to. Yet in a perfectly GTO game, nobody has edge. So what the fuck are we doing aiming for that? It makes much more sense to me to target imbalanced markets every step along the way if what you actually care about is bottom line. Because what's the alternative? You end up in the golden boy paradigm, where you want to be just sitting nosebleed high stakes so that you can get railed by people you don't even know and just variance it up versus the best players in the world.
Oh, there's so much variance in live poker with that too. It's insane.
I mean, it's cool to be the guy sitting with racks at the biggest table in the poker room. I get that, but at the end of the day, I think we both know that that's a futile paradigm that's coming from deep levels of insecurity. There's exceptions. It's got to be your true fucking passion, though.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. I am passionate. I'm a heads-up player. I'm extremely passionate about playing good players. I take enjoyment in the game when I play high-level thinking opponents. That's who I've learned against. Like, I've gotten my face smashed in repeatedly against certain players, and just that's how I've gotten better. And now, so when I was talking about like being more empathetic towards others, we're all on a journey. I can tell you exactly where I learned certain plays from. Like one guy, Strogos, he did one move against me where it was bet pot, overbet, and then I was forced to look into it because I was definitely overfolding. I wasn't sure how to beat it. It took me too long to really plug it in because eventually I was like, okay, he's doing this line on this kind of board enough time. So I looked into it, and now it's part of my game. So I really take high enjoyment of playing others who are gonna take those interesting lines. And but that's not the way to make money. My main concern isn't being the most profitable.
Well, it is long term if you assimilate the tactic.
Yes. Yeah. Also, it helps reduce burnout when you sit down at a table full of crushers and you hold your own. It feels pretty good.
And it's giving you an opportunity to actually uncover a weakness that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to uncover. And to me, I was telling somebody before, like, I could realistically be in any sport, I feel like. Because my only interest in poker is it's the landscape. It's the one landscape that I've encountered where I'm learning the most about myself on the most consistent basis. Because it's pushing me to that limit of self-introspection where it's triggering me constantly. And
we're so blessed in that regard. So blessed.
To be able to interface with something that exposes you on such an intimate level is it's a blessing for someone who really wants to grow.